Hello. Good evening, and welcome to Coastal Conversations, hosted by and powered by a better Glynn. Tonight, we're going to have a very important conversation with you all, and hoping that it is helpful for you as we talk about hiring practices in Glynn County, specifically in the Glynn County School System. I'm waiting on my co-host to pop in here, but as you all are coming in the room, please share. If you know any educators, anyone who has kids in the Glynn County School System, anyone who teaches in the Glynn County School System, we do think that this conversation tonight is going to be fruitful for us as a community. So we want to share it with as many people as we can. So share this broadcast. We're going to be looking at you all's chat in the live chat. So if you have any comments, questions, concerns, as we go through this conversation, it'd be very, very helpful for us to be able to drop them in the chat for us. So let me pull Bobby in. So again, we're having what we're calling a series of coastal conversations. Tonight, we're starting with the Glynn County School System and having conversations around the Glynn County School System. We know school's about to let out, but we thought this was a very important conversation, especially given that our election also includes Board of Education positions. So as an organization that is committed to civic engagement, committed to policy advocacy, and also committed to equity, we want to make sure that we're having these important conversations as we move through what it looks like to be a community that helps everyone thrive. So this is our Thrive Initiative. And through our Thrive Initiatives, we want to really get close to the vision that we have as an organization, as ABG, which is creating and cultivating a community where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. Regardless of your station in life, regardless of where you are and who you are, I want to make sure that you all are able to thrive in Glynn County, in our community. So let me just say a few things as I wait for my co-participant, Bobby Henderson, supposed to be popping in here in just one moment. Make sure he gets on here so we can have a conversation. But it will be me and Bobby tonight discussing what we have titled our Thrive Initiative. I'm going to go through that initiative while he comes through. But our Thrive Initiative is set to help us lead towards a thriving community. What does that mean? What do we mean by a thriving community? Here's what our vision is. We want communities where fairness and justice reign, and where we offer a wide range of economic and civic opportunities. We do that in several different ways through ABG. We also want a community that provides quality healthcare, whether mental or physical. We want to make sure that all of our citizens have access to that. Also, we want to invest in children, families, through education. We're going to be talking about that tonight, education, childcare, and housing as well. And then we also want to invest in individuals by way of social services and safety net resources to help folks who may need those services locally. And then finally, we want to make sure these opportunities exist regardless, again, of your station in life, ancestry, race, gender, religion, socioeconomic status. None of this should prevent anyone from being able to thrive in our community. That's what these conversations are about. They're about everybody thriving, and this is our Thrive Initiative. So we're going to have chats with many local leaders, local folks who are doing some great work in and around Glynn County. And we also are going to have conversations about issues that I think you all think are important to our community. So thank you all for jumping in. Can y'all do me a favor? Drop a comment in the chat just so I make sure you all can hear me. I can see the chat here on my screen. I just want to make sure that everything is all systems go. I'm still waiting on my co-host. Hopefully he'll pop in here pretty soon. We're having some technical difficulties. So before we start hopping into some of this data around Glynn County schools, we want to make sure that we are good to go. Oh, there he is. I believe he's good to go now. Okay, I see Dewana says she can hear. Hey, Dewana, how are you? Good to have you in. Always good to see Miss Dewana and hear from her. So Scout Wilson, I see she's here. I believe she's teaching over at St. Simon's. Good to see you and others here in the room. Hey, Bobby, good to have you here. They said they can hear us, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I just walked them through the Thrive Initiative. If you're an educator, if you are someone who's interested in the Glynn County School System, be sure you share this broadcast because we think we're going to have some good action items for tonight and also just some good takeaways from our discussion tonight. So I want to start here because we always want to start with data. We want all of our conversations to be data-driven, fact-driven. I will start with this caveat, though. Listen to what we got to tell y'all. We did an open records request with Glynn County, and we have not heard back from that request. As a matter of law, they are supposed to get back with us within a certain time frame. We have not heard back. So we had to go mine some data ourselves. Some of our team members, including Laura and others, have gone through and looked at some data for us. So we're going to grab some data points and talk through some of this. But we were hoping to get some of this from Glynn County Schools, but we were able to get some of it from other resources. So let's talk about this, Bobby. Employee salaries in Glynn County Schools. We looked at opengA.gov. All of this is public information. The average salary for an employee in Glynn County School System is $39,000, $39,123. Does that surprise you? Shocking?
It's embarrassing. I'll say that. Considering the cost of living here, the average cost of housing, it is not it's not fair for what teachers and administrators sacrifice in order to be of service to our parents and students here, for us to have a salary average that low, because even though that's the average, you know that there have to be a significant amount of people below that number in order for us to have an average that low.
Yeah, so there are certainly gaps in terms of earning across the board. We're going to talk about those, but what about y'all in the chat? When y'all see that number, that figure, when y'all think about the school system, think about our teachers, administrators, do y'all feel like that number is too low, or you feel like it's right where it should be? Would love to hear from y'all, but I'm right with you, Bobby. I think this is significantly low for the impact that educators and administrators could have in our school system. Now, let me just say this, wealth gaps or earning gaps are necessitated by a few different things at the school level. So we want to make sure we point that out. Depends on level of education, tenure, how long you've been teaching, in terms of who gets paid what. But we do feel like when you think about average salary across the school system, it's something that is really has a discrepancy there. So Scout says that there's a huge discrepancy between teacher pay and district admin pay. We saw that in our research of the data, a huge discrepancy. When she says huge, I would put all caps on that because we saw that when we looked at the admins, and then when we looked at the teachers who are getting paid, you see this huge disparity, and they're doing the yeoman's like work in the classroom, and we're seeing that discrepancy there, right, Bobby?
That's correct. And we're not saying that teachers should average, $100,000 a year, but when you see, like you see the top salary is $190,000, and the average salary across the district is less than $40,000. Glynn County, the median household income is 56. So Um, and
They're well
then
below the median.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So, I mean, if this is what we're using to improve our schools is being able to attract talent, uh, it's not
Mm.
very attractive. We're not going to sell everybody on the beach. I mean, the water's brown on the beach.
Yeah, yeah, I think so too, man. And we have over 2,400 employees in Glynn County. So it's not a small number of people who are experiencing either low pay or not enough pay in the school system. And as you mentioned, our top salary in Glynn County is $190,924, almost $200,000. And yes, that is at the admin level, administrator level, of course. And so we didn't want to put names in this data. All of it's public, so you can go and look it up. But I'm pretty sure that many people may know who that top salary is. But as we looked across the board, we're going to talk a little bit more about the top 10 or so, 20 salaries and some interesting data points around that. But let's talk a little bit about the schools. I think the schools are going to be important as well. I see that Derek dropped a link in here for teacher evaluations from a Stanford study. Thank you, Derek, for dropping that. You all check that out. So let's look at Goodyear Elementary. Bob, you want to tell them a little bit about the location of Goodyear, just so they understand the context?
Goodyear is one of the better located schools in Glynn County. It's right on off 17. It's a few blocks over from the hospital. So access to emergency services is very very adequate. It's in the middle of middle class income neighborhood, where most of the people in the neighborhood are homeowners. So that usually bodes well for outcomes for the school. However, and I will make this statement as well. Since 1974, I think it is, Glynn County has been under a mandated busing mandate in order to satisfy the school desegregation federal statutes. So kids are moved all around the county in order for each school to meet their necessary level of a minority majority mix. However, that's mostly for majority district schools. It's not necessarily for those schools like a Goodyear, which is why you can have the statistics the way that they're playing out here.
Yeah, so that's what we're seeing in terms of the state testing. We're seeing proficiency rates at Goodyear at 19% for math, 15% for reading. And when you look at the enrollment numbers of the student body, 93% of the folks who are at Goodyear are minority students. Now, let's look also at Burroughs-Millette. We got 26 math, 15 reading, 97% minority enrollment. So still low numbers there. And now we really want to contrast those numbers with what we're seeing elsewhere around the county. Oglethorpe Point is, where's that located at, Bobby?
Oglethorpe Point is on St. Simon's Island. It is in a very well-to-do neighborhood, and this is one that would have to meet that federal standard of busing so that the mix of majority and minority would mirror that of the county. Otherwise, you wouldn't have a 30% minority enrollment at that school.
Yeah. So for those of you who are listening, we'd be interested in knowing if any of these numbers are surprising to you in terms of schools, enrollments, and then also kind of the proficiency ratings for each one of these schools. So let's talk a little bit about Title I schools so that people who aren't educators, don't know the education system, know what Title I schools actually mean. So you want to talk to them a little bit about Title I schools?
So Title I schools are schools that, if you look at your free lunch numbers. That's where you're going to really get a full understanding of what a Title I school is, where those the median household income of the families is going to be somewhere around the poverty line, which is going to force that to be a Title I school. We talk all the time about how the city of Brunswick is #1 in the state as far as poverty for metropolitan area. So that's going, any of the students that are coming from city of Brunswick and going into these schools greatly reduces the median household income of those schools, makes them eligible for Title I. I think this population for city of Brunswick is, I want to say 18,000. And a good portion of those are minorities, are minors. So you have all of your housing projects are located in the city of Brunswick, and so you're dispersing those low-income families to several different schools. And then Glynn County has a large share of low-income areas that are not housing projects. A lot of your mobile home communities are low-income areas that are going to be, which people don't really think about that when they think about low income. They don't think about mobile home communities as far as income is concerned. So that's going to really lower your median household income for these schools, which is going to make them Title I.
Yep. So when you talk about schools like where are we at? St. Simon's?
Oglethorpe.
So St. Simon's, you have very high math and reading proficiency ratings, but you also have a pretty decent minority enrollment rating there, even though it's on St. Simon's. So
and St. Simon's is a Title I school because of that.
Yeah. So that's one of the things. St. Simon's is a Title I school, but that also poses the question, right? So you have low performance schools that are Title I schools in and around the city, right? But then St. Simon's is also a Title I school, but the performance is certainly higher at St. Simon's Elementary. So question now becomes, how is that the case when you do have higher than usual, if you look at Oglethorpe, minority enrollment in terms of the student body?
So that's the part of the conversation that I'm excited to talk about and also embarrassed to talk about.
So let's talk a little bit about some more data, okay? When we looked at the top 20 salary earners in Glynn County, in the Glynn County schools, we saw that only 4 of them are people of color. So when you look at the 20 top salary earners, from starting at that $190,000 mark and go down 19 more spots, you're only going to find 4 people of color who are in that top 20 range. Again, part of that has to do with tenure. Another part has to do with education range as well, but it also raises a recruiting question too that we're going to talk about. When we looked at Goodyear, which many of you all saw had lower numbers in terms of math and reading proficiency, we did notice that only 5 teachers at that school had master's degrees. And then when you look at St. Simon's, which we actually looked at, you have over 3 times the number of teachers. So all the first grade teachers, all the second grades have master's degrees. And then at least a number of teachers at St. Simon's have what are called specialists, or in common people's language, PhD level degrees at St. Simon's. So Bobby, what does that say to you when you look at those numbers and you see you got 5 master's level teachers at Goodyear, and then you have 3 times that number at St. Simon's, and EDD or any specialist degrees at St. Simon's that are the same number at Goodyear?
It would say that we are not dispersing our resources in an equitable fashion in order to best serve the students. It would say that some schools are more attractive than others. So what are we doing in order to make other schools attractive? And when we talk about being attractive, one of the things that we don't have is, where's the new talent coming from? If you have 16 teachers with master's degrees at St. Simon's Elementary, that means that new teachers coming into the community aren't necessarily going to St. Simon's. So you're not getting the skill set disbursement that you need in order to be proficient in underperforming schools.
And so Derek Heck, who's a Brunswick native, and also he's a friend of mine, but also is at Stanford now doing some doctoral work. He's done educator work for a while. His family's lifetime educators. His mom taught me in the gifted program. Ooh, she would have heard me say teach, she would have fought me. Taught me in the gifted program. But he says this, he says, and notice that the same kids who are living in the same conditions on the margins are benefiting from school environments that are not super saturated with kids from under-resourced families. Concentrating poverty is part of the problem, not ensuring that schools have a diverse student body. So it's not about what kids can do, it's about what resources they have access to. And that's what we're talking about, right? Access to the resources that are needed for these kids. I would think that many of these specialists would thrive in many of these schools who need some of that, correct?
Right. You know, you're going to, it should be structured where you are serving the needs of all of the students in the best means possible, which means that those people with a higher degree of skill are serving the students with the greatest need in order to close that gap. But it also means that the way we disperse students around the county, like Derek was mentioning, with the concentrated poverty at certain schools, we should take, and move some of those demographics. And historically, what we have done, which is what we do on St. Simon's Island, is we take those kids from an impoverished area and we bus them to those higher performing schools on the island. However, we never take those students from the island and bus them to the underdeveloped and high poverty concentration schools. So it means that there's a greater burden on those kids coming from the impoverished area to get up in the morning and get on the school bus and get to the better school than there is for the students in that particular area. But if we're going to say that these kids also, because of their economic status, are going to be better equipped after they leave school in order to perform well, then why wouldn't we deposit some of those students in underperforming schools in order to, one, lift the standards, but bring those resources to the schools, which also makes those schools more attractive, because a new teacher that's moving into the area doesn't see an underperforming school and say, I don't really want to go there.
Yeah. I mean, that makes perfect sense. And I would say that was the heart behind Brown and Brown 2, other decisions to help to integrate the schools, that it wasn't always a come here issue, right? Like, you got to go there because that's to help the schools improve as well. And to your point, when you make it that issue, and I think that Rebecca says this as well, you spend so much time on the buses, like it lays the burden on the folks who are impacted the most.
Right.
And it isn't something that we should be doing without thinking about how we can better do it. Because I think that a lot of schools that we do have that are under-resourced and underperforming are schools that we certainly need to concentrate some efforts on to help them be able to do that. And sometimes that means if we all really care about this and are serious about this, you need to get uncomfortable.
Right.
And if you want to stay in your comfort, then are you really concerned about all the citizens in our community? I'm not sure that you are.
One of the things that isn't talked about a lot are the implications of Brown, is that 27,000 educators and administrators were put out of work once 1971 busing mandate came into play.
Yeah.
And they weren't white educators and administrators. They were all Black.
Yeah.
You know, so you take all of these people that are functioning well, and people will talk about how well those segregated schools worked while they were under-resourced, right? Because there was a certain amount of passion. These were people that were born and raised in the communities in which they were educating, so there was a connectivity to the students that already existed. All of that is dissolved just through integration, because we didn't take the time to say, okay, how do we pull those resources, deposit them into, because we still have the same amount of schools.
Yeah.
We still have the same amount of students. So how do we use those resources in order to best serve all of those students? And class, another thing, last point, class sizes were a lot smaller then, which means that you're better able to educate because you don't have 20, 25, 30 kids in a class.
And somebody mentioned private school, man, we really don't have time to touch on that, because that was another one of the implications of Brown. If you see all the private schools that popped up in and around Georgia, it wasn't to provide a better education, but provide more segregation. So when we think about the private school pipeline, whatever you want to call it, in and around Georgia, you will see the numbers terribly skewed in the private school setting. And we don't have the time to even talk about the resources, money, and all that has to come into play there for those pieces. But we do want to talk about what we feel like is the dilemma that we have here, because we do have one, right? What we're seeing, and Bobby, you and I talked about this prior to us hopping on, is when I was looking at the list of the top 100 names, I think that there was not one Black male educator who was a teacher in the top 100 salaries in Glynn County. So some people would say that, well, Black men aren't applying, or we can't find the Black men. and to that we say, what? Why can you not find qualified Black male educators? And why is this important? Because as many ways as we try to tweak it and turn it, it's very important for minority students, especially Black male minority students, to be able to see a Black male in the school system teaching them. I can't tell you the number of stories of people who've told me my first Black teacher was in college, or I never had a Black teacher, a Black male teacher. And so as an African-American male, what does that do for you when you don't see someone in the classroom who reflects who you are? And that puts the onus on the school system, though. If the county isn't going out looking for people who are going to fill these roles, then they're going to still have the same problem over and over again. Right now, as it stands, and we haven't talked to Michelle about this, but right now there isn't an active recruiting effort happening at the historically Black colleges that are just around Glynn County. What'd you say, a 2-hour radius? How many HBCUs we got? 4 or 5?
There are several in Florida. You've got Edward Waters, which is 45 minutes away. You've got Daytona with Bethune-Cookman. You've got Savannah State. If you go stretch it out just a little bit more, you can hit Albany State and Fort Valley State. Nobody wants to stay in America's Georgia. Get them people over here to the coast.
But that actually, so what we see is we see recruitment efforts at Coastal, which is good. We want to retain right? We see people recruitment efforts at Georgia Southern. So you drive by Savannah State to recruit teachers from Georgia Southern when Savannah State's right there. And I don't know, I'm not sure we got many teachers who were educated at, or recruited at Savannah State University. So I think one of the things that Glynn County schools really have to think about is actively recruiting at the state and local HBCUs, including Edward Waters and others, to see if they might be able to pursue more diversity in our teaching. And I know Derek's here, but I know that data reflects that when folks have people that look like them that teach them, they perform better in the classroom. I'm just being honest with you.
Yes.
So that's one of the markers that I think that we really have to look at. We talk about diversity in the school system, but man, when I looked at that list and I didn't see a Black male teacher and very few Black male administrators in the top of that list, that's a whole problem.
Yeah, and with the national shift toward, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, you would think that we would apply more of that to our hiring practices, because if you look at how minority talent is dispersed around the county, it's not even reflective of the student populations that you have. So if 41% of your student population at St. Simon's Island are minorities, do you have a 20% representation of Black teachers over there?
Yeah, that's a good question. And the answer is no.
No. No.
Yeah.
So
hey,
go ahead.
I make note that Dewana and Stephanie did say that Glynn County is currently working on this. Like I said, the current HR director is not the past HR director. So I hope that our conversation is not a reflection on what she's doing currently, but what we've seen over the years is what we're saying. Stephanie says these practices have been in place years before current HR moved in position. So take that into consideration. So we want to make sure we gave space and time for that to be able to be lifted up there. Okay. And then Shamika said, in addition to recruitment, the environment and culture of the school has to be one that nurtures and and retains minority students. Let me tell you, that's very important. Just because you get them in the schools don't mean that you're able to retain or nurture them, because culture can kill someone's passion, zeal for the teaching role. So how can we create an environment, to Shamika's point, that will help to not only just hire them, but to retain them, keep a high retention on them.
And doing that in an environment where so many are leaving the profession altogether. We have a lot of teachers that are leaving the profession. And COVID was a big part of that. Mm-hmm. We highlighted people in Glynn County who were teachers, administrators that lost their lives to COVID, and we did that months ago, and there have been others that have passed since, so you talk about the national climate with regard to race. You talk about the recent passage of HB 1084 and SB 203, where the new Parents' Bill of Rights and inability to teach what they're calling divisive history, makes it harder for people getting into the profession or staying in the profession. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I do believe that it is made specifically harder on teachers of color or have a disposition toward equity. with regard to the classroom and the mandates that they're going to place on the administrations in order to move us in that more DEI direction.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to make sure. So Dewana did say that they are actively recruiting. She knows for a fact at Savannah State, Albany State, Fort Valley. Dewana, listen, if you need help, if you need HBCU grads to push these folks to get in these schools, I'll make a few calls too, because we need some of these folks in some of these schools. So I'm glad to know that Michelle and her team are doing some active recruiting there, and appreciate you for helping us kind of identify that. So for sure, I want to make sure I lift that up. Now, listen, I want to talk about curriculum because I know there's some teachers in here who, and some of y'all may get frustrated with the curriculum that comes in the size of a one-size-fits-all. So, so at the state level in Georgia, obviously there are standards you all have to teach to, but in some instances, I've heard from a couple of teachers who've told me at schools that are underperforming that there's this one-size-fits-all curriculum. There's kind of a lack of being able to differentiate or teach differently, and not having the autonomy to teach to the student as opposed to teaching to the standards that may not necessarily align with the student's learning needs. Now, Bobby, I know this is personal for you as well, right?
Yeah, having re-entered the elementary school system as a parent of 7-year-olds, my kids are different, right? They're twins, but they're different. They learn differently. They respond to teaching differently. And one of the problems that my wife has constantly had to overcome was this, one-size-fits-all teaching, where they're taught all of the concepts and they have to master all of the concepts rather than being given a set of options to say, okay, the bottom line is we want you to use the discipline that best fits your skill set with regard to learning and getting the right outcomes. And while I have one student that is going to excel at everything because that's just his mode of operation, I got another student who has music playing in his head all day long. He will daydream on you. And what will make him daydream is becoming overwhelmed and saying, I just don't get it. I knew how to do it this way. I don't get how to do it this other way. He's probably more like me in saying, I just need to get the right answer, right? As long as I'm getting the right answer, why does it matter? You see what I'm saying? So having to teach all of these concepts and for students to master all of these different ways in order to do the exact same thing, it's not beneficial to those students. And one of the problems that exacerbates that is class size. The inability to have that a smaller group of students that you're teaching to. I talked to one teacher who was at Altama, said that at one point they had 32 kids in one classroom.
My goodness. Wow. Yeah.
How is that teacher supposed to be successful at getting 32 kids on level?
Yeah.
That's near impossible.
Yep. Scout, who teaches, she says, and being required to use curriculum that are not research-based, like reading, writing curriculum for the past 7 years. So she's saying we're using curriculum that they ain't even put the research behind. Oh man, Dewana has bars. She said you can't teach a TikTok generation with an 8-track mentality. Oh, all right.
Bam.
Come through with the mic drop. But so that's the interesting thing. I've seen this with some teachers in my timeline who have been teaching really creatively. And Dewana's one of them. I've seen her do it in her classroom as well. And so students learn that way. Like like she said, we can't use old methods in order to teach children who are not familiar with those methods and then get frustrated when they don't necessarily learn those methods. So I'm grateful for teachers who are able to even do some differentiation or do something new in the classroom to help students to understand. But we really got to think through curriculum at the school level. And a lot of that stuff it happens at the board of education level. It happens at the state level. Those are things we're going to talk about here in just a moment. But we can't be apathetic about it. We can't just leave the onus on the teachers to say, hey, this is your lot in life. Go make productive students. If it's not working, then we need to make our voices heard and be able to help people understand why it's not working. So then the other thing is, I think we have situations where qualified individuals have been looked past for roles and leadership positions. Now, this is information that isn't always public, but there are certainly conversations that have been had where we've seen people who have applied for positions who were very qualified in their positions and roles and who were not hired for those positions. So I'm pretty sure the school board goes through vetting process, a CV, resume, interview process. But sometimes, man, you got to look at things and say, wow, this person looked like the ideal candidate and they weren't even given consideration for the role. And so when we look at the disparity, lack of diversity, especially at the administrative level, we were talking about this earlier, man. When you look downtown at the administrative building and the administrators, you're not going to see very much diversity in and around the county, in Glynn County. And I think that says a good little bit about the work that still needs to be done in and around the city in terms of recruiting, again, what Shamika said, nurturing and retaining qualified individuals to be able to fill some of these roles.
Right. So Michelle Seals is a year behind me in school. She was a very smart, very active student. Went on to get a degree. One of those people that you absolutely love to hear their story because they left and they came back. They came back in a capacity to serve, you know, and that's one of the things that our organization is really built around, getting that returning talent. She was a phenomenal educator, happened to be paired with the current superintendent, who was able to see her talent firsthand and give her opportunities. Now, I will say this, that Dr. Spence has done a good job with being able to recruit familial talent, right? It's the outside talent that is lacking. And a developing a pipeline of success, right? And it sometimes it's some of the same things that we face when we were talking about the Glynn County Police Department, where if you want to create systemic change, you have to look outside of your pipeline in order to bring those resources in and develop in that regard. And bringing minority resources in could help us get further along than where we are. And having only 4 of your top 20 salaries being minorities is not a good way to do that. I think Dr. Green is doing a phenomenal job with the role that she has in the Board of Education. Now, I will say that that role as superintendent is supported by the Board of Education, also directed by the Board of Education.
Mm.
there's only one minority represented on the Board of Education.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when you talk about developing an agenda and a plan toward creating this environment where qualified individuals are always going to have the ability to receive these leadership roles and be placed in a position to succeed, right? So my boys go to Satilla Marsh. They have a black male principal at Satilla Marsh. However, there's only 2 other black people in teaching capacity at the school.
Mm.
You know, so when you're building that model out and you have a principal and a vice principal that are minorities and they only have 2 minority teachers,
Yeah.
how is that building a model of success? And then
Yeah.
going back to what we were talking about with the difference between St. Simon's and Millette, where you have all of this, the resources hoarded at St. Simon's Elementary rather than dispersed to these other locales, so that you can, you know, sometimes our best learning is being paired with somebody that knows.
Yep, for sure. So a couple teachers have chimed in here. Scout says if parents clamor for smaller class sizes, it's more likely to happen. Admin does not hear its educators. I've heard that from several educators. It's hard for them to get through the admin, but maybe if the parents stepped up, Scout says that it could be a good thing. So Dewana says, to be honest, Dr. Spence has the most diverse cabinet that has ever been seen in the district. So want to make sure we lift that up for sure. We certainly want to see that across the board and down the board in terms of being able to do that. So hopefully that can also happen as well. And then Scout also chimed in and says, and we have frustrations with this, Scout, just so you know, as an organization. Report cards from the Board of Education, sometimes you can't trust them as far as you can throw them, because they don't generally communicate the whole truth. And we have folks on our team who are very interested in research and being able to tell the bigger picture story. And sometimes transparency doesn't happen for the sake of reporting well on the system that might not be doing so well.
To speak to the report card system, I have 2 first graders. It's hard for us to track where they are within 6 weeks. You know, so and then their report card, it's all digital. You know, before, you know, you got that little gold envelope, you got that green thing, the green card in there. You took that home to your parent. Now, I'm not saying that we need to go back to that, but my parents could see my performance in a lot more fluent fashion than my wife is having to look at a legend and grades on separate pages, having to go back and forth in order to look at where our children are performing, and having to wait every 6 weeks in order to see that, rather than utilizing Infinite Campus in a manner where we can see their performance daily. We used to have that ability.
You know, the kid's gonna show up at your job tomorrow and fight you.
Hey man, come on, come on, y'all slide through.
They said let's keep it digital. We don't want to send no paper copies home. So here's a couple of things we want to talk about in terms of asking you guys for next steps. And we have asked some of the educators in here to also give us some things that we could do to help, but we cannot reiterate enough. We know that it is midterm season, that we're not in a presidential election year, but y'all, voting is immensely important if you want to impact the education system in Glynn County. The bosses are the Board of Education. You cannot split that any other way. That the Board of Education sets the policies and sets the agenda for the school. And every other year, or every year, we have, depending on the cycles, We always going to have Board of Education members who are up for re-election or new members who are up for election. And you cannot ignore these offices. You cannot. And so one of the things that we've been trying to get people to get out to do is vote in the primaries, because it sets the tone for November. This isn't partisan. We don't care about parties at ABG. Okay, we just want people to have a choice. And so we want to educate folks, help them understand who it is that's running. But at the same time, we want y'all to get out to vote. These numbers, Bobby, are they depressing?
Bro, I want to fight. I want to fight. When I call down to, or I inbox my contact down at the Board of Elections to see what the numbers are when I utilize our state rep for one of our partner organizations, and they send me numbers, I get angry. Yeah, I don't get a little bit mad. I get absolutely angry that people are not taking voting seriously because there's not a president on the ballot. Your child's education is on the ballot. We saw the implications of not being able to resource kids in an effective and timely manner during COVID. Us going down and begging the Board of Education, can we please just start the year masked, because the numbers say that we should, and execute your plan based on that. If it wasn't for our advocacy, they would have never started using the community numbers in order to determine what they should be doing with regard to the schools. We lost parents, we lost grandparents, we lost siblings because kids were coming home and seeming healthy, but transferring COVID to their loved ones. You know, they're gonna
not just that, but the educators. I mean, they every single day they're going to work because they're asked to go to work, and they're the frontline workers during this entire pandemic. And so we as an organization, we're like, can we please start the year this way so that we can understand the data and understand the numbers? It has nothing to do with political leanings or anything. We're thinking about the educators. We're thinking about the kids, the parents, and the grandparents. But to your point, it starts with who is on the Board of Education.
Correct.
You can talk to your blue in the face and show up at public comments, and we're going to talk about public comments here in a second. But they're the ones who are voting. But you vote them in, or you don't vote. And now you don't have a voice on the Board of Education. And so now it goes downstream. Curriculum development, it goes downstream. Whatever we do on the policy side, whether it's mask or no mask, health mandates, those are things that are immensely important. I want to read a couple of comments here, and then I want to talk to you about this other piece, this public comment piece. Key says, I'm sure every teacher on the line will agree. Everyone in the system has a voice in that process except classroom teachers. We just talked about that. The ground level teachers can tell you where the problems lie a lot better than someone sitting downtown who never visits a classroom, or someone in the big office in Atlanta looking at testing data. For sure. For sure. Kelly says, we still have not done a good job of connecting how voting coincides with folks' everyday life. We have not connected with the local policies, connect with everyday life and struggles. Yes, we got to do that. Because if you don't connect with the everyday life of people, they're going to see it as not valuable for them to go vote. Not valuable for them to go vote. We were talking about this earlier, Bobby, about this idea that the squeaky wheel gets the oil, right? So we were talking about last fall in the public comment period. What we found is so many people came out to publicly comment and be against the mask mandate. And Bobby, you said that we heard from someone in leadership that we won't talk about that has said something to us that was very interesting to help shape this conversation, right?
Said that all she all they are hearing is folks don't want masks. And it's because the constituents that she represents, I'm just gonna keep saying she because it's too hard to not say it. They weren't calling. Civic engagement happens beyond the polls.
Yeah.
Civic engagement is daily, understanding what policies are being made, how they're being executed, who's being hired, who's being fired, what are the disciplinary responses to incidents. Civic engagement is happening every day. Being an active member of the body politic is not just a right, it is a responsibility to be actively engaged with every facet as much as you can, and especially if you have someone, a loved one involved in these systems. I've got 2 kids that are still in school. So I have to be actively involved in the decisions that are being made to impact them on a day-to-day basis. So we don't get the privilege of disengaging because there's too much at risk. And if we're going to be engaged with knowledge, we have to be engaged with activity as well, to lay our concerns before the people who are making the decisions.
Yep. Scout said they ignored her when she contacted them directly by phone and email. Listen, we get that very often, but here's what we found, y'all. When we do it in enough numbers and with enough force, there's no choice but to listen. And so I think that what we saw was the galvanization of one group of folks who shaped the narrative for them to make a decision, as opposed to being able to galvanize people. And as Dewana and Kelly have said, we got to connect it to people's lived experiences, right? So even with an issue like that, it has to connect with who they are and what their lived experience is. So I think that's very important. So we're advocating for voting. We're always going to do that. I know groups like This Is What Voting Looks Like is also doing that as well. But we also, as groups, want to make sure we're connecting that to people's everyday experience. Before we close, I want to talk about the other piece that we want to talk about, which is advocating for qualified people of color in leadership positions locally. I think we don't do enough of this in Glynn County. And it's unfortunate because, one, we probably don't know who is applying for the positions, but there are instances where we do know that, and where we have to show up and argue for diversity in hiring, especially when someone is very, very qualified. Now, Bobby, you're a Glenn Academy Terror.
Yes, sir.
I am a Brunswick High Pirate. Okay. There are things from a school perspective that we always don't agree on, because
absolutely
we have perspectives on which school is better. But here's what I'm going to say, and this is one of my personal asks for you all tonight, and I've done this personally, and I think us organizationally, when we're thinking about equity in hiring practices, we want to make sure we're pushing for that. So over the past several weeks, there's been a lot of conversation on Facebook about the Glynn Academy women's basketball coach or girls basketball coach. We had the most recent coach leave to go home to Camden to coach the Camden women's girls basketball team. And so there's a vacancy. I've talked about this publicly. Others have talked about this publicly, but I've reached out to the superintendent. I've reached out to many of the leaders in the county school system to drop someone's name in the hat to fill this role, who is well qualified. Her name is Miosha, and she was the coach of Needwood Middle School, and probably still is currently the coach. And she played for Coach Teresa Adams. She has a couple of different degrees. She serves in the military. She is a fantastic basketball coach. And so I want to ask you all tonight to help us out, help me out and send an email to leadership and admin around in and around the county to advocate for Miosha to be the next girls basketball coach at Glynn Academy. Now, we have made it easy for you, as ABG always does. We have a link. All you got to do, listen to me, all you have to do is click the link and it populates an email in your email service provider that has the names of all the leadership, Blackstone, Spence, and Steve Waters, who make the decisions. And it has a templated email. You can change it any way you want to. But again, if you don't know Miosha, I would encourage you to look her up. She is certainly well qualified and would lead that team well. So we got an action item for you all. I think I dropped it in the chat. Y'all let me know if y'all can see it. And Bobby, do you have anything you want to say about this hire? Because I know you're a terror, and I want to make sure that I give you space. But I'm advocating for a terror, man.
Listen, that's huge in and of itself. I will say this, that OSHA, another person that graduated right behind me, got to see her grow and develop on the basketball court. As far as her background, her ability to connect with kids, her leadership skills, impeccable across the board. You're talking about somebody that is born and raised here in Glynn County, grew up as a terror. There was just a push throughout the entire county to get the new gym named after Coach Adams. What better way to answer that than to name one of her best players in history. OSHA was electric every time she stepped on the court. Phenomenal defender, tenacious on the court. She would get out there and ball with us and get on people's nerves because she was going to D up. So definitely in the mode of Coach Adams, you can't ask for a perfect segue that is more perfect than this.
That's good. That's good. All right. So y'all, any closing comments, questions, thoughts as we close this out? We do hope that the data on the front end of this was helpful, but also for any educator here in the room, we want to make sure we keep in contact and see how we may be able to continue to support you all as we move through these conversations. Obviously, I know many of you wouldn't be willing to have a conversation with us publicly. We understand that, but we want to be your advocates. We want to be able to stand up for you and to provide an environment where all your students thrive, regardless of what community you're teaching in. So we're certainly looking forward to being able to continue to support you in that way. And tonight was just the start of that. So any comments, thoughts, questions? I think Janetta said that Miosha and Janine would make a dynamic coaching duo. This is her nickname, O. Miosha is invested in the community. I think a lot of people have said that they support her, but we wanted to provide you all with an easy way to do so. So y'all share this link. Make sure you click on it. It's super easy. You just click the link. It gives you a templated email. You can flesh it out and change it any way you want to, but we would love for you all to support her as the next coach for Glynn Academy. And we hope that the administration makes the right decision in hiring her as the next coach as well. Any closing parting shots, Bobby?
Man, I just want to express my gratitude for every teacher that we have in Glynn County, every administrator. We offer this critique. We offer our own analysis. Of course, we don't have all of the data. We don't have all of the experience or expertise in this regard. These are mere observations. But at the end of the day, we exist for one reason, and that is to improve the lives of the people here in Glynn County. Yeah. It is the reason why we chose the name that we try to live by as we operate. Yep.
And DeWanna has something important to say. Don't just support her getting the job. that support her while she's working at fundraisers, attending games, mentoring players. Whoa, that's a whole nother conversation. We certainly want to talk about support for local athletics, especially women's athletics. We support our football programs, love our football programs, but I think sometimes our women's athletic programs certainly get the short end of the stick for sure. Shamika says here in closing, every child deserves to see themselves in individuals they spend more time with during the week than at home. I think she's responding to Georgette's comment, who said that their skin, educators shouldn't be based on the color of their skin, but their ability to teach. But I think it really is important for children to see themselves in and around these environments. So we're not discounting the comment there, Georgette, but it's really important for us, especially as an organization where we have seen and had these experiences. It's very important for us to be able to see folks who look like us in the classroom. So I appreciate you for chiming in and for tuning in as well. Appreciate y'all. We'll see y'all next go round as we continue what we're calling our Thrive Initiative. If you all didn't see this on the front end of it, we're going through an initiative to help all folks here thrive in Glynn County. I think that this initiative is going to be huge because we're having real conversations with real people. So stay tuned for our next segment of that. And thank you all for joining us tonight. Make sure you share this stream and also share that link so that we can continue to push for hires that we feel like are going to be helpful and equitable in and around our county. All right. Have a good night.